A coin could secretly fund a war against the empire that minted it. This is the hidden story of ancient rebellion currency, where money was a tool of subversion. By the end, you will understand how forgotten symbols on everyday coins financed entire underground movements and challenged the might of history's greatest empires. How did a simple fish or a stray star on a piece of metal become a dangerous signal? What ingenious methods allowed rebels to communicate and raise funds right under the noses of their rulers? This journey reveals the clandestine art of turning official currency into a weapon. When you think of rebellion, what is the first tool that comes to mind in the bustling agora of a Roman city? The sound of commerce had a distinct voice. It was the sharp, metallic ring of bronze and silver striking stone counters, a constant percussion of daily life. This was not just money changing hands, it was the empire speaking. Every coin was a tiny, durable ambassador of state authority, traveling farther and faster than any imperial decree. On one side, the stern profile of the emperor, a reminder of who guaranteed the value in your palm. On the reverse, perhaps a temple, a goddess of victory, or symbols of abundant harvest. The message was unambiguous: stability, prosperity, and divine favor, all flowing from the central power. Historians like David Sear describe these coins as the most deliberate of all symbols of public identity. They were economic propaganda, miniaturized and mass-produced. The metals themselves, silver, gold, bronze, were carefully controlled, their purity a direct reflection of the government's strength and trustworthiness. To hold a coin was to physically hold a piece of the state's promise. Controlling the mints where these coins were struck was therefore one of the most sacred duties of sovereignty. It was the ultimate monopoly, a declaration that only the emperor or the senate could define value and facilitate trade across continents. Any deviation from this system, any coin struck without official sanction, was far more than a counterfeit. It was an act of treason, a direct assault on the pillars of the realm. This absolute control over the narrative of value is what makes the next chapter so astonishing. For when rebellion simmered, the rebels faced an impossible dilemma. They needed to pay soldiers, buy supplies, and fund their cause, but they lacked the state's mints, its bullion, and its official sanction. Their solution was not to break the system, but to infiltrate it, to use the empire's own language of power against itself. The first cracks in this monolithic financial control appeared not with a shout, but with a carefully placed silent symbol. The weight of an empire is often felt most keenly in the grain it takes from a farmer's harvest. For every bustling city center gleaming with marble and message-bearing coins, there were countless villages and provinces straining under the demands of a distant capital. This was the true catalyst, the relentless pressure of taxes levied to fund foreign wars, of religious edicts that outlawed local traditions, of governors who saw their post not as a duty, but as a personal treasury to be plundered. In these pockets of simmering discontent, loyalty to a far-off emperor or king became an abstract, even burdensome concept. What mattered was survival, dignity, and the preservation of a way of life. Historical records from the late Roman Republic, for instance, detail how provincial communities could be bled dry by corrupt tax collectors, creating a bitterness that made the idea of resistance not just appealing, but necessary. Similarly, across the vast expanse of the Persian Empire, regional satraps or local populations with deep-rooted cultural identities sometimes chafed under mandates from the royal court, viewing them as an affront to their own ancient customs. This created a specific and dangerous problem for any group wishing to organize against such power. A rebellion needs more than passion, it needs practical means. It requires funds to feed fighters, to secure weapons, to bribe guards, and to care for the families of those who join the cause. Yet openly collecting these resources was an immediate death sentence. Announcing a treasury for sedition would draw the swift and brutal attention of the very authorities you sought to undermine. So how do you build a financial network when every transaction is watched and every large movement of wealth is suspect? The oppressed faced a paradox. To challenge the system, they first had to operate invisibly within it. This desperate need for a covert economy is what led dissidents to look down at the most common object in their hands, the official coin of the realm, and see not just the face of their oppressor, but a canvas for secret hope. A rebel with a purse full of the emperor's own silver was a rebel already caught. Every transaction became a potential trap. The local blacksmith, the grain merchant, even a sympathetic farmer, all were accustomed to the steady flow of authorized coinage. A sudden, large purchase of iron or wheat paid for with perfectly minted, traceable currency would raise immediate questions. Where did this wealth come from? Who was this stranger with imperial funds? Authorities kept a watchful eye on markets for precisely such anomalies, understanding that unusual economic activity often shadowed political unrest. Using the state's money to fund its own overthrow was not just ironic, it was a swift and certain route to discovery. The logistical challenges were equally daunting. Moving the sheer volume of coins needed to pay an army, even a small one, was a conspicuous endeavor. Heavy, noisy, and requiring guarded transport, a treasure convoy was impossible to hide. It painted a target for both imperial patrols and common bandits. So if official coin was too dangerous, what were the alternatives? Barter systems, trading goods for goods, were far too slow and localized to support a coordinated, widespread movement. You cannot easily barter a dozen chickens for a shipment of spearheads from a distant province. Pure precious metal bullion, while valuable, presented the same problems of weight, identification, and origin. A gold ingot stamped with a royal seal was as incriminating as any coin, and an unmarked one would be suspect and difficult to authenticate in everyday trade. The rebellion was financially paralyzed, needing to exist and spend within the normal economy while remaining utterly invisible to it. This impossible dilemma demanded a radical solution. The answer was not to create a separate shadow currency, but to transform the existing one. Rebels needed a way to take the emperor's coin, the very symbol of his power, and subtly mark it as their own. They needed to embed a layer of silent communication and trust into the metal, creating a dual-purpose instrument that could pass through the hands of 1,000 loyal subjects, yet reveal its true allegiance only to those who knew what to look for. This was the genesis of the secret symbol, a tiny, deniable act of defiance that turned everyday money into a tool of subterfuge. A chisel strike across a king's face is a powerful, if desperate, form of speech. Before rebels mastered the art of hidden symbols, their first acts of monetary defiance were raw and unmistakable. Archaeologists have unearthed Seleucid coins from the 2nd century, before the Common Era, bearing deep, deliberate gouges over the portrait of Antiochus IV. This ruler's policies, which included placing a statue of a foreign deity in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, ignited the Maccabean revolts. For the rebels, the official coin was not just money, it was a portable idol, a constant reminder of a hated authority and a profound cultural violation. Defacing it was a ritual act of purification as much as it was an economic one. Each marred coin, passed from hand to hand, spread a silent, visible message of contempt that no royal edict could erase. This was economic vandalism on a grassroots scale, what scholar Philip calls monetary graffiti. It served a dual purpose. Psychologically, it allowed individuals a tangible, if small, act of resistance, chipping away at the aura of invincibility surrounding the ruler. Economically, it subtly eroded trust. A defaced coin was still technically spendable, but its damaged state raised quiet questions about the stability of the regime it represented. This principle exploded onto a much larger stage several centuries later within the Roman Empire. As the central authority in Rome weakened during the crisis of the 3rd century, a general named seized control of Gaul, Britain, and Spain, declaring the so-called Gallic Empire. Suddenly cut off from the official mints in Rome, his breakaway state faced an immediate currency crisis. The solution was a flood of locally produced coins, known today as barbarous radiates. These were crude, lightweight imitations of the official Roman, often featuring blobby, barely recognizable portraits of emperors. They were mass-produced not for deception in the traditional sense, but out of sheer necessity, to keep a local economy functioning independently of Rome. While these early defacements and counterfeits lacked subtlety, they were revolutionary in their implication. They proved that a population could, through collective action or local authority, wrest control of the very symbol of value. They taught a crucial lesson, that targeting coinage was not just an attack on wealth, but on the narrative of power itself. This blunt instrument of defiance, however, was a double-edged sword. A defaced coin announced dissent to everyone, friend and foe alike, while a poorly made counterfeit undermined the economic stability the rebels themselves needed. The next evolutionary step required not less artistry, but more, moving from the chisel's crude statement to the engraver's secret whisper. The engraver's tool hovered over the die, the blank metal stamp that would shape 1,000 coins. His task was one of profound duality, to carve a symbol that would whisper a forbidden truth to a knowing few, while appearing as mere decoration to the imperial mintmaster standing over his shoulder. This was the birth of a secret visual language, a lexicon of hope etched in bronze and silver. To understand it, we must learn to see as the initiated did, to recognize that an ordinary animal or a common plant could carry a second, urgent meaning. For early followers of Christianity in the Roman Empire, facing periods of intense scrutiny, the simple outline of a fish was far more than a decorative motif. Within their community, the Greek word for fish, ichthys, served as an acronym for a central statement of their faith. To carve this symbol onto a coin, or to use such a coin in a marketplace transaction, was a silent, deniable signal of solidarity, a way to identify a safe house or a fellow believer without uttering a single dangerous word. Similarly, a sheaf of wheat might appear to celebrate a bountiful harvest, a perfectly acceptable theme for any coin. But for a rural population crushed by grain taxes levied for distant legions, that same sheaf could covertly represent resilience, self-sufficiency, and a quiet promise of shared resources among those who resisted. The power of these symbols lay in their cultural depth. They were not random codes invented in a vacuum. They drew upon a shared pool of stories, religious beliefs, and astrological knowledge that was second nature to the local population, but obscure or meaningless to the foreign administrator. A specific constellation stamped beside a ruler's portrait might honor an imperial birthday officially, yet to a people with a rich tradition of celestial navigation and myth, those same stars could reference an ancient prophecy of liberation or signify allegiance to an exiled local leader claiming divine mandate. Even the iconography of official gods and goddesses could be subtly subverted. A slight alteration in the posture of a deity, the addition of a small, locally sacred animal at their feet, or the replacement of a standard attribute with a regional symbol could transform a coin from a token of imperial unity into a banner of cultural pride. This required immense cleverness from the engravers, who operated under the constant threat of exposure. Their artistry was in crafting ambiguity, designing images that supported a perfectly innocent, state-approved interpretation, while simultaneously triggering a powerful, specific understanding in the heart of a rebel or a sympathizer. In this way, a coin became more than currency. It became an encrypted newsletter, circulating news, affirming identity, and building trust within an invisible network. The most sophisticated rebel movements took this concept of the coded coin and systematized it, moving from individual acts of symbolic defiance to the operation of full-scale, clandestine mints. The true test of a secret symbol was its journey from a single die to 1,000 hands. This required an operation far more complex than a lone engraver's defiance. It demanded the creation of an entire shadow economy, beginning with a hidden workshop. Picture not a grand imperial mint with rows of furnaces, but a concealed cellar, a remote cave, or a back room shielded by the noise of a legitimate blacksmith's forge. Here, under the constant threat of discovery, skilled artisans became rebels. Their first and most dangerous task was sourcing the raw material precious metal. They could not simply order silver bullion from the royal treasury. Instead, they relied on a quiet, continuous harvest, melting down jewelry donated by sympathizers, collecting damaged official coins, or secretly diverting small amounts of metal from mines under the guise of waste or loss. Every ounce had to be acquired without raising suspicion, a slow and perilous accumulation of hope. The Bar Revolt against Roman rule in the 2nd century provides a stunning example of this covert industry in action. For 3 years, Jewish rebels not only fought Roman legions, but also built a functioning independent state, complete with its own administration. A cornerstone of this independence was their currency. Lacking the resources to mine and refine new metal, they used the most audacious method possible, overstriking. They took captured Roman denarii, coins bearing the image of the Emperor Hadrian or his predecessors, and placed them on their own rebel dies. With a heavy blow of the hammer, they imprinted new designs over the old Roman ones. The Roman portrait was often still faintly visible beneath symbols of the revolt, a palm tree, a cluster of grapes, or the facade of the temple in Jerusalem, alongside inscriptions declaring for the freedom of Jerusalem. This was more than minting, it was a symbolic act of reclamation. Each overstruck coin was a physical declaration that the authority of Rome was being erased and replaced by a new sovereign Jewish identity. It funded the payroll for soldiers, the purchase of supplies, and the machinery of a nascent government, all while circulating a powerful propaganda message to every person who held one. But producing the coins was only half the battle. Distributing them into the general economy without detection was an art form of its own. This is where the network proved its worth. Trusted merchants, those sympathetic to the cause, would mix the rebel currency in with their regular takings of official coins. A farmer selling olives might pay his tax with a mix of Roman and rebel silver, knowing the overstrike was convincing enough to pass a casual inspection. Sympathetic money changers in market towns could subtly introduce the new coins into circulation, exchanging them for official currency brought by travelers. The coins themselves were the perfect couriers, moving silently in the pouches of traders, pilgrims, and everyday citizens, their true allegiance known only to those who understood the symbols. The entire system relied on a fragile web of absolute trust, where a single merchant's arrest or a blacksmith's loose tongue could unravel the entire operation and lead authorities straight to the hidden mint. This community of supporters, from the metal smuggler to the market vendor, formed the lifeblood of the rebellion, a silent army enabling a war fought with economic ingenuity as much as with swords. Their collective courage raises a profound question. What happened to these intricate networks of trust when the fighting finally stopped? The silence of a hidden mint is broken only by the hammer's fall, a rhythm of rebellion striking hope into metal. Nowhere was this act of defiance more deliberate or more fraught with meaning than in the Jewish revolts against Rome. During the First Jewish-Roman War, which began in the year 66, and again 6 decades later in the Bar Revolt, rebels did not hide their symbols, they proclaimed them. They created what scholar rightly calls a declaration of independence in bronze and silver. Abandoning all pretense of subtlety, these coins were designed as open challenges to imperial authority. Gone was the stern profile of the Emperor Vespasian or Hadrian. In its place, rebels stamped a ceremonial chalice, perhaps used in temple rites, and a lush palm branch, a symbol of victory and the land itself. Around these images ran a bold inscription in ancient Hebrew script, "For the freedom of Zion." This was not a secret signal, it was a public manifesto. Every transaction made with such a coin was a tiny act of political theater, a physical rejection of Roman rule passed from one hand to another, funding the rebellion while broadcasting its ultimate goal, a sovereign nation. The practical function of this currency was as vital as its symbolism. These coins paid the soldiers defending besieged cities and fortresses, they purchased food and weapons from within the community, and they facilitated the daily administration of the rebel state that briefly existed. But their psychological power was perhaps even greater. For a people living under occupation, to hold a coin that bore your own language, your own sacred symbols, and your own aspiration for freedom was to hold a piece of the future you were fighting for. It transformed abstract hope into a tangible, spendable reality. It told every fighter and every supporter that they were not merely destroying an old order, but were actively building a new one. This creation of an alternative financial reality was of insurgent strategy, proving that sovereignty begins with the authority to define value. Yet, even within these overt declarations, historians ponder the possibility of a hidden layer. Could the specific arrangement of leaves on a palm branch, or the number of steps on a chalice design, have conveyed coded information to military commanders or priests within the rebel ranks? While the primary message was for all to see, the intense pressure of a guerrilla war suggests that some markings may have served a dual purpose, identifying trustworthy couriers or signaling safe routes through contested territory. The tragic end of these revolts, however, casts a long shadow over this monetary defiance. Following the Roman victory, the systematic recall and melting down of rebel coinage was a final, crushing act of reclamation. The empire sought to erase not just the physical tokens of independence, but the very memory of that alternative future from the historical record. This pattern of bold monetary rebellion followed by forceful suppression was a cycle that would echo far beyond the hills of, finding a strange and enduring parallel in the distant provinces of another vast empire. The hills of Britannia held a different kind of secret, one etched in swirling patterns and stylized horses. Following the Roman conquest, a profound tension simmered beneath the surface of provincial life. While the legions built their straight roads and imposing forts, the conquered Celtic tribes faced a slow erosion of their world, their gods, their language, and their very identity. In this quiet struggle for cultural survival, their ancient tradition of minting coins became a powerful and deniable weapon. Long before the Romans arrived, tribes like the Iceni and the had developed a sophisticated and beautiful coinage, rich with abstract art. After the conquest, they were often permitted to continue producing these local currencies, a pragmatic Roman allowance for regional trade. But a closer look reveals these were no longer purely economic instruments. They had become canvases for coded defiance. Take a typical silver coin of the Iceni tribe, the people who would later follow Queen into open rebellion. To a Roman tax collector, it might simply show the profile of a local ruler or a stylized horse, a common Celtic symbol of power but researchers like Dr. John Sills point to the incredible complexity hidden within these designs. The flowing mane of that horse could, with a shift of perspective, resolve into the grimacing face of a warrior. The intricate patterns around the edge, often dismissed as mere decoration, might cleverly incorporate tiny depictions of swords, chariots, or shields, the very tools of resistance. These were not mistakes or artistic whims, they were deliberate, layered messages. Following the brutal suppression of Revolt in the year 61, when open defiance meant annihilation, this symbolic language may have become even more crucial. Coins with specific abstract patterns could have served as secret rallying points for dispersed survivors, a way to identify who still held to the old ways and who might be trusted. A coin passed in a market transaction, its hidden face recognized only by the recipient, could signal a safe meeting place or affirm ongoing solidarity. This was rebellion not of the battlefield, but of the spirit, funded by the very currency that circulated under Roman noses. The genius of this system was its plausible deniability. The Romans, viewing Celtic art as primitive and chaotic, likely saw only confusing ornamentation, not subversion. This allowed the coins to circulate freely, fulfilling their economic purpose while performing a far more important cultural one. They preserved a visual language that predated Rome, keeping the stories and symbols of Celtic identity alive in the hands of every farmer, merchant, and craftsperson. With each transaction, they whispered that the people of the horse and the spiral had not forgotten who they were. This case reveals a profound evolution in the use of secret symbols. Here, the goal was not necessarily to fund an immediate active army, but to finance the long-term preservation of a culture itself. The coins became a kind of silent, enduring treasury for identity, ensuring that even in defeat, the memory of independence and the framework for a future resurgence never fully disappeared. This subtle, artistic resistance raises a compelling question about the limits of such symbolism, and what happens when the hidden message is not one of preservation, but of an impending, violent reckoning. A coin's true value lies not in its weight of silver, but in the collective belief of everyone who accepts it. This fragile trust was the ultimate target of economic warfare in the ancient world. While rebel armies clashed on distant fields, a quieter, more insidious battle was waged in the marketplace and the money pouch. By introducing subtly altered currency into circulation, insurgents could attack the very foundations of state power without ever drawing a sword. The strategy was deceptively simple, yet devastatingly effective. Imagine a local mint, operating in a rebel-held cave or forest clearing, producing coins that were nearly perfect copies of the official imperial currency. To the untrained eye, they were identical in size and design. But in the hands of an experienced merchant or a money changer, a slight difference would be felt, a subtle lightness, a paler color, a softer ring when dropped on a stone counter. These coins were debased, meaning they contained less precious silver or gold than their official counterparts, diluted with cheaper metals like copper or lead. When these coins were secretly funneled into the economy, they acted like a slow-acting poison. As more and more of this inferior metal circulated, the overall trust in the currency began to erode. Merchants, sensing the decline in purity, would start to demand more coins for the same amount of grain or cloth, instinctively protecting their own wealth. This creeping devaluation led to price increases, a form of ancient inflation that strained the budgets of ordinary families and soldiers alike. The state faced a terrible dilemma. It could try to identify and recall the bad coins, a logistical nightmare that would publicly admit its loss of control over the money supply. Or it could continue minting its own pure coins, watching helplessly as its precious bullion reserves were drained to uphold a standard that rebels were systematically undermining. Either choice sapped the empire's financial strength, diverting resources and attention from the military front. For the common person, this economic instability was a daily, tangible hardship. Every trip to the market became an exercise in anxiety, weighing and scrutinizing each coin, wondering if the money earned from a week's labor was somehow becoming less real. This constant, low-grade uncertainty chipped away at the perception of imperial competence and stability. The emperor's face on the coin was a promise, a guarantee of value. When that promise felt broken every time you bought bread, your faith in the ruler himself could not help but weaken. The battlefield, therefore, expanded into the mind of every citizen. A rebel coin was not just funding a rebellion, it was a tiny, persistent argument against the legitimacy of the state, passed from hand to hand with every purchase. It turned every transaction into a potential moment of doubt, making the financial system itself a theater of silent, pervasive conflict. A marketplace rumor travels on the wind, but a coin carries its message in your pocket. For the common farmer selling olives or the weaver trading cloth, a piece of currency was a daily, unremarkable object. Yet within the resistance, that same coin transformed into something far more potent, a compact courier of hope. Its power lay in its public anonymity. To the imperial tax collector or the suspicious garrison soldier, it was simply money, perhaps a bit worn or oddly stamped, but spendable. To the initiate, however, that odd stamp was everything. A tiny anchor might signal that a ship had arrived with supplies at a certain cove. A specific arrangement of stars could indicate the next secret gathering was to be held under a full moon. A coin bearing the image of a local deity, but with a slight alteration to its headdress, could confirm a recent rebel victory in the hills, news too dangerous to speak aloud. This was propaganda made material, circulating at the speed of commerce. Every time a sympathizing merchant gave change to a customer or a farmer paid a field hand, they weren't just completing a transaction, they were participating in a silent broadcast. The coin served as a constant, tangible reminder that the current regime was not the only reality. It whispered of a parallel network of loyalty operating right under the empire's nose, fostering a sense of shared identity among people who might never meet face to face. Simply by choosing to accept and respend such a coin, an individual performed a quiet, deniable act of solidarity. There was no oath to swear, no dangerous meeting to attend, just the conscious decision to keep a particular piece of metal moving through the economy. This built a grassroots web of complicity, where the entire community, through its mundane economic life, became the bloodstream of the resistance. The system's brilliance relied on a delicate balance. The symbols had to be clear enough to be understood by allies, but ambiguous enough to be dismissed by authorities as a minting error or provincial artistry. This required the coins to be, above all else, credible. They had to feel right in the hand, sound right on the counter, and look convincing at a glance. For the rebellion's message to spread, its money first had to master the art of flawless imitation. The engraver's greatest skill was not invention, but perfect imitation. To fund a rebellion, your currency had to be utterly convincing. This required a deep, almost intimate study of the enemy's own art. Rebel die-cutters would acquire an official coin, often at great personal risk, and use it as their template. They painstakingly every detail, the precise curve of the emperor's laurel wreath, the exact spacing of the letters in his titles, the specific style of the border dots. Their goal was to produce a coin that would pass the two critical tests of the ancient marketplace, the glance and the ring. In the hand of a busy merchant, it had to look and feel correct. When flicked with a thumb onto a stone counter, it needed to produce that familiar, high-pitched ring of good silver, not the dull thud of a base metal counterfeit. This technical precision was the shield that protected every person who later used the coin. Only once this flawless facade was achieved would the engraver introduce the whisper of rebellion. This might be a change so subtle it bordered on the psychological. Perhaps the portrait's eyes, typically gazing with detached authority, were slightly downturned, giving the emperor a look of melancholy or defeat. An extra seemingly errant letter might be squeezed into an abbreviation in the inscription, forming a coded word or a rebel leader's initial. The most ingenious alterations were hidden in plain sight, a tiny axe head woven into the leaves of a victory wreath, or a minute ship's prow replacing a single berry in a cluster of fruit. These were not mistakes, they were of clandestine communication. Modern numismatists, the scientists of coin study, have uncovered stunning examples of this ancient artifice. In collections around the world, coins long catalogued as official issues are now being re-examined under high magnification. What was once dismissed as a die-cutter's slip or a peculiarity of style is now recognized as intentional subversion. A Roman denarius might show the goddess Roma holding her spear in a slightly altered grip, a stance that corresponded to a local militia's formation. A Greek drachma from a restive colony could feature a dolphin under the city's patron deity, a symbol that held a specific urgent meaning to the initiated. The success of this mimicry was measured in silence. The coins circulated, were spent, and funded the cause without raising alarm. This very success, however, created a historical puzzle. Because they were designed to blend in, these secret coins did not announce themselves to history. They disappeared into the vast archaeological record, indistinguishable from millions of other pieces of metal, until a curious researcher, armed with new technology and a different set of questions, learns to see the hidden patterns. The hidden face of a rebellion can remain unseen for 2,000 years. It is only in the quiet, sterile light of a modern conservation laboratory that these ancient secrets finally begin to whisper. Here, a numismatist leans over a microscope, examining a seemingly ordinary Roman denarius recovered from a provincial excavation site. To the naked eye, it is unremarkable, bearing the standard profile of the emperor and a goddess on the reverse. But under high magnification, a different story emerges. Faint, almost ghostly lines become visible along the edge of the design, lines that do not match the official die. They form a tiny, crude anchor, a symbol with no place on an imperial coin from that region. This is the moment of discovery, where modern science meets ancient subversion, transforming a piece of currency into a historical detective story. The tools of this new archaeology are revolutionary. X-ray fluorescent scanners, held over the coin's surface, can map its elemental composition without causing any damage. This reveals if the silver content is consistent with official mints of the period, or if it shows the telltale signs of a clandestine workshop using melted-down jewelry and recycled metal. Even more revealing is a technique called reflectance transformation imaging. By capturing hundreds of photographs of the coin under different angled lights, software constructs a detailed topographic map of its surface. This can expose the subtlest tool marks, showing where an engraver might have carefully added a minute symbol after the main design was struck, or where the metal flowed differently under a rebel die compared to an official one. Perhaps the most powerful method is die linkage study. Every coin is struck from a pair of engraved metal dies, one for the front or obverse and one for the back or reverse. These dies wear out and crack over time. By digitally comparing thousands of coins, researchers can identify which ones were struck from the same pair of dies, essentially creating a family tree of coin production. When they find a cluster of coins with hidden symbols all sharing the same unique die flaws, they have pinpointed the output of a single, secret minting operation. This detective work has led to stunning reinterpretations. Coins from the Illyrian Revolt in the early years of the 1st century, once thought to be crude local imitations, are now understood through die studies to have been produced in an organized, sequential campaign, revealing a far more sophisticated rebel infrastructure than historians had assumed. Elsewhere on late Roman bronze issues from troubled frontier provinces, reflectance imaging has revealed tiny punched marks, a cross, a star, a letter added after minting. These are now interpreted not as random graffiti, but as possible validation marks from local rebel commanders or communities, signaling the coin was acceptable for use within their zone of control. Each of these discoveries is a fragment of a lost narrative. The numismatist is not just cataloging metal, they are reconstructing a network of trust, mapping the invisible geography of descent. Every newly identified symbol forces a reevaluation of the historical record, reminding us that the most common objects can be the most eloquent spies, waiting centuries for someone to learn their language. The final collapse of an empire is not a single event, but a slow, confusing unraveling. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the Western Roman Empire was a tapestry coming apart at the seams. Legions were recalled, borders grew porous, and distant provinces found themselves increasingly alone. In this gathering twilight, the once authoritative voice of imperial coinage began to falter and distort, creating a monetary mystery that still puzzles historians today. Coins from this chaotic period are often strange, crude, and inconsistent. They might bear the name of a long-dead emperor, or feature a portrait so stylized it becomes a ghostly mask. Mint marks are misplaced or invented, silver content plummets, and odd, unexplained symbols appear in the fields around the design. For generations, numismatists cataloged these coins under a simple explanation: decay. They were seen as the sad products of collapsing institutions, of mint workers who no longer cared or no longer knew the proper forms. But a more intriguing question now whispers from these worn pieces of bronze. What if this was not mere decline, but deliberate redesign? In the power vacuums left by receding Roman authority, local strongmen, breakaway generals, and emerging barbarian kingdoms scrambled to control their territories. They needed to pay soldiers and administer what remained of civic life, and that required a functioning currency. Yet openly declaring independence by minting wholly new coins was still a dangerous provocation that could attract the attention of a still formidable, if distant, central power. The safer, smarter strategy was ambiguity. A local warlord in Gaul or Britain could continue to strike coins in the name of the current, powerless emperor in Ravenna, maintaining a thin veneer of loyalty. But into these coins, he could introduce subtle signatures of his own real authority. An unusual monogram tucked beside the emperor's portrait might be the strongman's personal emblem. A specific animal, like a boar or a wolf meaningful to his regional followers, could appear on the reverse where a Roman goddess once stood. These were not just poor imitations, they were transitional currencies, navigating a dangerous moment where the old power was fading, but the new one dared not speak its name too loudly. Scholars refer to figures like or Constantine III as usurpers, men who declared themselves emperors in the provinces. Their coinage is a fascinating case study in this gray area. Some of their issues are clearly rebellious, boldly bearing their own names and titles. Others, however, are more cautious hybrid creations that blend imperial imagery with localized symbols, as if testing the waters of autonomy. On the turbulent frontiers, this blurring was even more pronounced. Germanic federate troops, hired by Rome to defend its borders, were often paid in coin. As imperial supply lines broke down, their commanders sometimes took it upon themselves to produce the necessary pay. The coins they made, while based on Roman models, often incorporated Germanic artistic sensibilities, geometric patterns, or symbols of tribal allegiance. To a Roman purist, these were barbarous and degraded. To the warrior who received it, it was valid payment, stamped with the marks of his own people's identity and the authority of the chieftain who now guaranteed its worth. This period represents the ultimate blurring of the line between official currency and rebel coin. When the central authority's light grows dim, every local issue becomes, in a sense, a secret symbol, a quiet declaration of who really holds power in a town, a valley, or a military camp. The confusion we see in the coin record is not just noise. It is the sound of a world fragmenting, of 100 smaller voices tentatively beginning to speak through the medium of metal, their messages now so entangled with the chaos of the era that we struggle to separate signal from the static of a dying empire. A single, enigmatic mark on a coin can rewrite a chapter of history, or it can lead us down a path of pure imagination. This is the profound ethical tension at the heart of this entire field, a constant balancing act between preservation and interpretation. When a researcher holds a 2,000-year-old bronze coin with an unusual scratch or an extra dot, they are holding not just an object, but a responsibility. The immediate, powerful temptation is to connect that mark to a known revolt, to see a brave act of defiance in every irregularity. After all, the stories of secret symbols are compelling, humanizing a distant past with tales of cunning and courage. But history demands a more disciplined kind of listening. The first and most important question a numismatist must ask is brutally simple: is this mark intentional? The ancient minting process was physical and imperfect. Dies cracked from repeated hammer blows. Planchets, the blank metal discs, could be misaligned under the strike. A tired engraver might slip with his tool. Later, a coin lost in the dirt for centuries could be scratched or corroded by chemicals in the soil. What looks to our hopeful eyes like a carefully placed rebel sigil might simply be the random scar of time. The risk of overinterpretation, of weaving an elegant narrative from what is essentially ancient noise, is a constant professional hazard. It turns every potential symbol into a philosophical puzzle. Do we project our desire for a good story onto silent metal, or do we allow the object, in its stubborn simplicity, to challenge our assumptions? This is where rigorous methodology becomes the anchor. Substantiating a claim of clandestine symbolism is a step forensic process, a collaboration between the library, the dig site, and the laboratory. It begins with context. A coin found in a burned layer of a city known to have been sacked during a rebellion carries more weight than one pulled from a riverbed. Researchers then cross-reference the symbol with every available historical text, from official chronicles to fragmentary letters, asking, does this mark a line with a known group, a leader, or a slogan from this specific time and place? Metallurgical analysis provides another critical layer. If a coin's composition matches that of a known rebel mint's output, rather than the official imperial standard, the unusual symbol upon it gains tremendous credibility. The most convincing evidence often comes from pattern recognition. Finding one coin with a strange mark is an anomaly. Finding 50 of them, all from the same region and time period, all bearing the same distinctive symbol executed in the same style, that is a pattern, and patterns in archaeology are the foundation of historical truth. This critical lens is not meant to drain the romance from history, but to fortify it. It ensures that the narratives we build about these clandestine networks are as sturdy and reliable as the metal that carries their whispers. By holding our interpretations to this high standard, we honor the true ingenuity of those who risked everything to send a message, ensuring their silent signals are not drowned out by the modern clamor of a good tale. This disciplined perspective now allows us to examine a few symbols that have, against all odds, survived this gauntlet of scrutiny. A coin from the dying days of the Western Roman Empire can feel like a message in a forgotten language. Among the flood of crude bronze issues, certain pieces stand out not for their artistry, but for their cryptic additions. Long after leaving the mint, someone took a sharp tool and punched a tiny, deliberate mark into the metal, a cross, a star, a Greek letter, or an abstract geometric shape. These are not random scratches. They appear with consistency on coins from specific regions and periods of great unrest, yet their true purpose remains one of numismatic's most tantalizing puzzles. One leading theory suggests these are tax validation marks. In a fragmenting empire, where countless local authorities and warlords demanded tribute, a stamped coin might prove the tax had been paid to a particular official, preventing double taxation. Another compelling idea frames them as bankers' or money changers' guarantees. In an era of rapidly debasing currency, a trusted merchant might stamp coins as still having acceptable metal content, a personal seal of approval to keep local trade flowing. But the most intriguing possibility, given the context of rebellion and collapse, is that these punches were the signatures of local militia leaders or rebel cells. A coin bearing a specific mark could signify it was acceptable currency within a zone controlled by that group, or even that it had been issued by them to pay their fighters. The truth is, all three theories could be correct at different times and places, a testament to the chaotic ingenuity of a world rewriting its own rules. Across the Channel in Celtic Britain, the mysteries are woven into the coin's very design. The beautiful, abstract silver staters of tribes like the are galleries of enigmatic symbols. A horse transforms, its mane becoming a series of human faces. A disjointed pattern around the edge resolves, upon close study, into tiny wheels, swords, and shields. For decades, scholars debated whether these were purely artistic expressions or held deeper meaning. The current consensus, led by researchers like Dr. John Sills, leans heavily toward intentional symbolic language. The horse itself was a potent symbol of sovereignty, of the warrior elite. The hidden faces likely represent ancestors or deities watching over the tribe. The weapons and wheels are not random decoration. They are a miniature arsenal, a statement of strength and readiness. But here too, a layer of uncertainty persists. Were these symbols meant for public morale, a statement of cultural identity to anyone who held the coin? Or could specific combinations, a certain arrangement of swords with a particular wheel style, have acted as coded signals during times of conflict, identifying allies or signifying a chieftain's changing allegiance? The coins present the symbols but withhold the key to their full conversational context, leaving us to admire the complexity of a lost visual dialect. Even the highly standardized coinage of the Greek world holds its share of deliberate, unexplained oddities. On otherwise perfect Athenian owl, the most trusted currency in the ancient Mediterranean, one occasionally finds a small secondary punch, a tiny crescent, a dolphin, or a bunch of grapes struck into the coin after its initial minting. These are not mistakes. The leading theory from experts like Professor Peter Van posits they could be countermarks, applied by a foreign state or a local authority accepting the Athenian coin into their monetary system, essentially giving it their own stamp of approval. Yet, in times of political upheaval, such as when a city-state was torn between oligarchic and democratic factions, these marks take on a more charged potential. Could a dolphin stamped on an owl signify the coin was sanctioned by a seafaring, democratic resistance group? Was a cluster of grapes the mark of a faction backed by vineyard owners? Without a written record explicitly linking the symbol to a group, we are left with compelling possibilities rather than certainties. This embrace of the unknown is not a failure of history, but its very engine. Each unexplained mark is an open question, an invitation for the next generation of scholars to bring new technology or a fresh perspective to the conversation. These coins remind us that the past is not a puzzle we will ever completely solve, but a dialogue we are privileged to join. And if the coins themselves can hold such silent, personal codes, it forces us to ask who the individuals were that risked everything to create them. True weight of a secret coin was carried long before it ever entered circulation. It was felt in the cramped, smoke-filled room where an engraver bent over a soft steel die, his hands steady not from calm, but from the sheer force of will required to ignore the consequences of a single slip. His name is lost to us, and that anonymity was the core of his safety. He was likely a trained artisan, perhaps once employed in an official mint, whose skill was now turned to a dangerous new purpose. His work required more than technical mastery. It demanded absolute secrecy and unwavering trust. Each tiny symbol he carved, each deliberate alteration to an imperial portrait, was an act of faith in a cause he might not live to see succeed. The pressure was immense, for a poorly executed die would produce coins that felt wrong, that rang false, and would endanger every person who later used them. His workshop was a world of hushed voices and guarded glances, where the clink of metal and the hiss of the lamp were sounds of both creation and profound risk. His work was made possible by another shadowy figure, the supplier. This individual operated in the gray spaces of the economy, diverting precious metal from its intended course. He might be a miner who concealed a portion of his daily find, a merchant who melted down donated family heirlooms, or a corrupt official willing to look the other way for a share of the hope. His role was one of quiet accumulation, turning scattered resources into the raw material of rebellion. Every ounce of silver or bronze he provided was a story of sacrifice, a piece of personal wealth or community treasure willingly given over to be transformed into a weapon. The logistics were a nightmare of silent transfers and hidden caches, moving heavy, valuable metal through a landscape watched by imperial informants and patrols. Once the coins were struck, they needed to move. This task fell to the couriers, the nervous system of the entire operation. They were the merchants, pilgrims, and travelers who carried these dangerous tokens in secret compartments of their bags or mixed casually with their legitimate earnings. A single courier might never know the full network, only their immediate contact and the coded signal for the next handoff. Their courage was of a different kind, a courage performed in the open, under the gaze of authority, with a smile and a steady hand while their heart pounded. They relied on the very ordinariness of commerce as their camouflage, betting their lives that the hidden symbols would go unnoticed by the wrong eyes. Discovery meant the end of everything. Historical records from stable periods outline the severe penalties for currency crimes against the state, which were treated as treason. While we must speak carefully and focus on the historical context, the fate awaiting those caught in such acts was understood to be dire, a final testament to how seriously authorities viewed this economic subversion. This looming shadow makes the actions of these individuals all the more extraordinary. They were not soldiers on a battlefield, celebrated for their bravery. They were civilians who chose to fight with the tools of their trade, their connections, and their silence. Their motivation likely sprang from a deep well of moral conviction, a belief in their community, their faith, or their right to self-determination that outweighed the terror of the possible consequences. In rendering themselves invisible to protect their cause, they also disappeared from the grand narratives written by the victors. We know the names of emperors and rebel generals, but we will never know the name of the engraver whose hidden anchor funded a supply ship, or the merchant whose clever distribution of coins kept a cell of fighters fed for a month. This is the profound human layer to our story. The cold metal we study in museums was warmed by the hands of individuals who poured their skill, their risk, and their conviction into every strike of the hammer. Their legacy, however, did not die with them. The principles they pioneered, the art of using the enemy's own systems against them through coded communication and economic pressure, would echo far beyond their ancient world, waiting to be rediscovered by those facing oppression in ages yet to come. The principles of silent subversion did not fade with the Roman Empire. Instead, they evolved, finding new life in the secret societies and philosophical circles of 17th and 18th century Europe. In an era where direct criticism of a monarch or the church could mean imprisonment, groups like the Freemasons or the Rosicrucians communicated through a rich tapestry of symbols, emblems, and coded rituals. Much like the ancient engraver who hid a rebel's mark within an emperor's portrait, these societies embedded their ideals of reason, liberty, and fraternity within seemingly innocuous imagery. The compass and square, the all-seeing eye, the pyramid. Their meeting places and published materials became a kind of intellectual currency, circulating radical ideas about governance and human rights under the protective guise of brotherhood and esoteric study. They operated within the established social order while quietly laying the philosophical groundwork that would, in time, challenge that very order to its core. This same tactical spirit of coded value found its most direct parallel in the 20th century's darkest hours. During the Second World War, occupied nations across Europe faced a brutal version of the ancient rebels' dilemma. The Nazi regime controlled the official economy and currency, using them as tools of exploitation and control. In response, underground resistance networks did not just sabotage trains, they forged money. They established clandestine print shops to produce false ration coupons, allowing people to obtain food. They meticulously counterfeited occupation currency to fund their operations, from buying weapons on the black market to financing the escape routes for those in hiding. The most ambitious operations, like the British orchestrated plan to forge massive quantities of German Reichsmarks, were economic warfare on a grand scale, designed to destabilize the enemy's financial system from within. These were not mere counterfeits for personal gain. They were instruments of survival and liberation, modern echoes of the Bar Overstrike, using the oppressor's own medium to fund his defeat. This thread connects 2,000 years of human conflict, revealing a timeless tactical truth. To effectively challenge a powerful system, one must often speak its language while changing the meaning of the words. The ancient rebel understood that the emperor's coin was not just metal, but a vessel of trust and authority. By inserting a secret symbol, they did not destroy the vessel, they redirected its cargo, siphoning that trust toward an alternate vision of community and power. Every hidden fish on a Roman denarius, every overstruck temple on a Jewish shekel, every stamped star on a late Roman bronze, was a small act of rewriting the rules from inside the game. This legacy teaches us that the battle for hearts and minds has always been fought on a financial front. Control the narrative of value, and you influence the very possibility of resistance. Today, this concept vibrates with new relevance in our digital landscape. We no longer trade primarily in stamped metal, but in data, cryptocurrencies, and online influence. The mediums have transformed from tangible coins to intangible code, but the underlying contest remains strikingly familiar. It is a contest over who gets to define what holds value, how trust is established, and where loyalties truly lie in an interconnected world. The silent symbols of the ancient world remind us that even the most established systems of power are permeable, forever vulnerable to the quiet, clever act of nature has always been the master of the silent signal. In a dense rainforest, a perfectly harmless butterfly flutters by, its wings a brilliant, unmistakable pattern of orange and black. To a hungry bird, this is not a meal, but a warning, for those colors perfectly mimic a different species that is deeply unpleasant to eat. This is biomimicry, a survival strategy millions of years in the making. The butterfly gains safety not by building a fortress or growing spines, but by mastering the art of deceptive appearance, by carrying a hidden identity that changes how it is perceived. This exact same principle of protective mimicry was at work every time a rebel coin passed from one hand to another in an ancient marketplace. To the imperial tax collector, the bird in this scenario, the coin was just another piece of acceptable currency, bearing all the correct shapes and letters. It blended seamlessly into the economic ecosystem, offering no reason for alarm. But within its design, like the butterfly's hidden genetic code, was a second identity, a potent signal of allegiance and shared purpose visible only to those who knew what to look for. The rebels were not just forging metal, they were engaging in a form of human biomimicry, using the enemy's own visual language as a protective shell for their dangerous truth. This evolutionary perspective reveals their strategy as something more than clever. It reveals it as instinctively brilliant, a natural application of a universal survival tactic to the arena of human conflict. We see this same principle in the plant world, where trees under attack by insects can release subtle chemical signals through the air, warnings that are detected by neighboring trees, prompting them to bolster their own defenses. This covert communication network operates entirely unseen within a system of air and scent that the attacking insects themselves rely upon. The rebel financial network functioned in a strikingly similar way. The trusted economic ecosystem, the flow of silver and bronze for bread and cloth, was the medium, like the forest air. The hidden symbols were the chemical signals, carrying urgent information, warnings of crackdowns, news of victories, calls for gatherings. Along pathways the authorities were completely blind to. This biological lens helps us appreciate the innate cleverness of the approach. It frames the creation of secret coinage not merely as a historical footnote of rebellion, but as a sophisticated, almost organic innovation. It was a way to ensure the survival of an idea, a community, or a cause by allowing it to move, grow, and communicate while wearing a perfect disguise. The individuals who designed and used these coins were tapping into a deep, pre-human logic, the logic of the harmless butterfly and the whispering forest, proving that the most effective forms of resistance are often those that understand how to hide in plain sight. For a collector holding a 2,000-year-old coin, its surface tells two very different stories. One is written in the common language of commerce, a standard issue piece of the empire, its value measured by its weight in bronze and its condition. The other story, if it exists at all, is a fragile whisper of defiance, a hidden symbol that could transform it from a common artifact into a unique historical witness. This is the collector's conundrum, where the cold calculus of the market collides with the priceless weight of narrative. In the niche world of numismatics, a standard Roman from the reign of Trajan might trade for a few $100s. But let that same coin bear a confirmed clandestine mark from the Bar Revolt, a tiny secret validation from a rebel cell, and its value becomes almost immeasurable, soaring into the tens of thousands. It becomes a trophy of history, a tangible connection to a specific desperate moment in time. This creates a passionate and often contentious marketplace. Auction houses buzz with excitement over a newly attributed piece, while online forums erupt in debate over a blurry photograph of a potential symbol. Is that an intentional anchor or a scratch from a medieval farmer? Is that unusual monogram evidence of a local usurper's mint, or simply a die cutter's playful flourish? Authenticity is everything, and the line between a priceless relic and an interesting but ordinary coin can be vanishingly thin, resting on the expert opinion of a handful of specialists who have dedicated their lives to learning this visual language. This pursuit naturally leads to profound ethical questions. The thrill of the hunt for a rare rebel coin can, in some cases, inadvertently fuel the looting of archaeological sites. A coin ripped from the ground without proper documentation loses its most crucial element, context. Was it found in a burned layer of a city besieged during a revolt, or in a peaceful merchant's hoard? That information is the key that unlocks the symbol's true story, and once lost, it can never be fully recovered. Responsible collectors and institutions now place immense emphasis on provenance, the documented history of an object's ownership. They understand that a coin's journey from the ancient soil to the display case must be transparent and ethical, ensuring that the pursuit of history does not contribute to its erasure. This responsibility creates a fascinating tension within the collecting community itself. For some, the primary value is in the story, the direct human connection to an individual engraver's courage. For others, the value is in the rarity, the thrill of possessing something unique, the satisfaction of completing a specialized set. These perspectives are not mutually exclusive, but they highlight the modern echo of the coin's ancient duality. 2,000 years ago, the object had a public value for trade and a secret value for the rebellion. Today, it has a public market value and a private, deeply personal value to the person who holds it. This multifaceted worth reminds us that value is never an inherent property of the metal itself. It is a story we collectively agree to tell. The ancient rebel believed the hidden symbol made the coin more valuable than its weight in silver, because it purchased hope and funded freedom. The modern collector might value that same symbol for the way it completes a historical puzzle or represents a pinnacle of a lifelong passion. The historian values it as a primary source, a direct message from the past that bypasses the narratives written by the victors. In this way, every secret coin continues its work long after its mint has fallen silent. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, to question what we consider precious, and to listen for the quietest voices in history, which often speak through the most ordinary of objects. The shimmering gold of a Byzantine solidus was more than money, it was a direct line to heaven. In an empire where the emperor was God's chosen regent on earth, coinage became a sacred instrument, each piece a tiny, circulating icon of divine sanctioned order. This profound fusion of faith and finance makes the anomalies within Byzantine currency all the more puzzling. During the empire's long, turbulent history, from the relentless sieges of the 7th century to the bitter internal wars over religious images, the official mint's voice was meant to be singular and clear. Yet scattered through collections are coins that whisper of something else entirely, of silent networks operating within the very heart of the Orthodox world. A standard gold coin might bear the portraits of the emperor and his co-ruler, but upon closer inspection, a strange, intricate monogram is tucked into the field, a tangle of Greek letters that does not match any known imperial name or title. On a bronze phallus from a provincial mint, a crude countermark, a cross, a star, a letter, is punched harshly over the emperor's face long after the coin was first struck. These are not random acts of vandalism. In a state where theology was politics and rebellion was a sin against both crown and cross, such marks demand a deeper reading. Scholars like Philip and Michael have spent careers cataloging these oddities, and the hypotheses they present open a window into a world of clandestine allegiance. One compelling theory centers on the period of iconoclasm in the 8th and 9th centuries, when emperors outlawed the veneration of religious icons, leading to the widespread destruction of sacred art. For those who secretly opposed this policy, the openly expressing their faith could mean severe punishment. Could a specific monogram or a subtle alteration to the cross on a coin, perhaps making its arms more equal, in the style favored by traditionalists, have served as a secret sign of solidarity? A coin passed from one merchant to another, bearing this mark, might silently identify a safe house where banned icons were still cherished, or even help funnel donations to monks hiding from imperial authorities. The coin itself, the ultimate symbol of imperial authority, could thereby secretly fund resistance to the emperor's most deeply held religious decree. This transforms the currency from a tool of state orthodoxy into a vehicle for spiritual dissent, its golden surface a mask for a dangerous, hidden fidelity. Another mystery swirls around the chaotic 7th century, a time of military collapse, plague, and relentless invasion by Persian and then Arab armies. As the empire fought for its very survival, power often fragmented. Local generals in distant themes or military provinces sometimes had to act with autonomy simply to organize a defense. Some numismatists scrutinized the crude, emergency-issue coinage from this period, looking for clues. A bronze coin might nominally bear the name of the reigning emperor in Constantinople, but its style, weight, and the symbols on its reverse are purely local. Could a certain issue, with a distinctive helmeted figure or a unique arrangement of letters, actually represent the covert minting of a regional commander, raising and paying his troops without waiting for authorization from a beleaguered and distant capital? This would not be open rebellion, but a necessary, shadowy assertion of practical control, financed by coinage that walked a careful line between acknowledging central authority and asserting local survival. Even within the gilded corridors of the Great Palace in Constantinople, coins might have played a covert role. In an environment perpetually thick with plots and usurpations, financing a conspiracy required discreet resources. A conspirator with access to a mint, perhaps through a bribed official, could order a special run of coins. To the outside world, they would be perfectly normal, perhaps celebrating a military victory. But within the conspiracy, a tiny detail, the specific spelling of a title, the direction a saint is facing, the inclusion of an extra dot, could identify these coins as the plot's treasury. They could be used to pay palace guards, secure the loyalty of key senators, or fund the swift movement of messengers, all while appearing to be nothing more than the empire's own currency circulating for everyday purposes. The Byzantine case study stretches our timeline and refines the concept of the secret symbol. Here, the subversion is often not against a foreign occupier, but against a prevailing orthodoxy, whether political or religious, from within a sophisticated Christian state. The symbols become more abstract, more theological, and more integrated into the complex visual language of a civilization that saw itself as the earthly mirror of divine order. Finding their meaning requires us to listen for heresy in a hymn and to see conspiracy in a prayer etched in gold. A cross stamped on a coin could be an act of worship or a map to a secret meeting. In the ancient world, where the divine right of kings was not a metaphor but a political fact, religious symbols were the most powerful and dangerous vocabulary available. To challenge a ruler was often to challenge the gods themselves, making faith the ultimate double-edged sword. For a rebel, this presented a unique opportunity. By adopting the state's own sacred imagery, or by clinging to banned symbols of their own faith, they could craft messages that were perfectly ambiguous. To the authorities, a coin bearing a common religious motif might appear as nothing more than a display of piety, well within the bounds of acceptable devotion. But to the initiated, that same symbol pulsed with a second, urgent meaning, transforming spiritual language into a cipher for rebellion. Consider the humble fish, the ichthys, on a Roman coin of the 3rd century. In the sprawling, pluralistic empire, a fish could represent many things: a bounty of the sea, a sign of the goddess Venus, or simply an attractive design. There was no law against it. But for a growing community of Christians, living under periods of intense suspicion, the fish was a secret handshake etched in metal. To use such a coin, or to accept it knowingly, was to silently declare one's faith and identify a fellow believer. This turned every marketplace transaction into a potential moment of connection and trust-building, funding the underground church not through open collection plates, but through the subtle circulation of solidarity. The symbol's power lay in its deniability. It allowed the community to grow and organize right under the nose of an empire that could, at any moment, view that growth as a threat. This principle inverted dramatically when the state itself adopted a single official faith. Following the conversion of Emperor Constantine, Christianity moved from the shadows to the throne. Now, the cross and the Chi-Rho monogram became emblems of imperial authority, stamped on coins to announce the empire's divine mandate. For groups declared heretical by the state church, such as the Donatists in North Africa or later the Monophysites in the East, open worship could mean exile or worse. In this context, a subtle deviation on an official Christian coin became an act of profound defiance. A coin might show the standard cross, but perhaps with one arm slightly longer, reflecting a theological nuance specific to a persecuted sect. Or a biblical inscription might be abbreviated in a unique way, recognizable only to those who shared the banned interpretation. By using the empire's own sacred currency, but with a barely perceptible twist, these communities could maintain their theological identity and fund their separate networks, all while appearing to use perfectly orthodox money. They weaponized the state's religious intolerance by hiding in the very imagery it demanded. Perhaps the most poignant examples come from moments of cultural annihilation, where a people's entire spiritual world was under siege. Following the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, Jewish revolts were not merely political, they were desperate struggles for religious survival. The coins they minted, overstruck on Roman denarii, were plastered with sacred symbols, the ceremonial chalice, and used during the haunting facade of the temple itself. These were not hidden ciphers, they were open, heartbreaking declarations. Yet even in this overt display, historians ponder a hidden layer. Could the specific number of columns on the temple facade, or the arrangement of fruits on a coin, have conveyed coded information to priests scattered after the war, instructions for preserving rituals in secret? The coins publicly funded the rebellion, while possibly privately encoding the very rituals the rebels were fighting to save. This spiritual dimension infused the rebel economy with a gravity far beyond mere commerce. For the individual passing a marked coin, the transaction was no longer just about buying grain or paying a debt. It was a sacrament of resistance, a tangible act of faith that linked their daily survival to a larger cosmic struggle. The metal in their hand was not just currency, it was a tiny, portable altar. This transformed participation from a logistical necessity into a moral imperative, strengthening the bonds of the community with the unbreakable glue of shared belief. When your money is also your prayer, every exchange becomes an affirmation of who you are and what you are willing to endure. The blockchain is a ledger written in light, a permanent record of transactions that no single authority can erase or control. In 2008, in the wake of a global financial crisis that shook trust in centralized institutions, an anonymous entity known as Satoshi proposed a radical alternative, Bitcoin. This was not merely a new kind of money, it was a philosophical statement, a declaration of independence for the digital age. At its heart lies a powerful parallel to the ancient coins we have been exploring, a modern rebellion of value forged not in hidden mints, but in lines of cryptographic code. Both movements sprang from a profound disillusionment with a prevailing system. Where ancient provincials saw their wealth extracted for distant emperors, the creators of cryptocurrency witnessed financial institutions falter, bailouts for the powerful, and a loss of personal economic agency for the individual. The response across was strikingly similar: to build a new system of trust from the ground up, one that operated outside the traditional gates of power. The ancient rebels' hidden symbol and the modern cryptographer's complex algorithms serve an identical core function. They verify authenticity within a community of believers. On a bar shekel, a specific arrangement of palm leaves or a perfectly executed overstrike signaled to a fellow rebel that this coin was legitimate, minted by their own people, and acceptable for funding their cause. In the digital realm, this verification happens through the blockchain, a decentralized public ledger where every Bitcoin transaction is recorded, time-stamped, and sealed with a cryptographic signature. You do not need a bank or a government to tell you the coin is real. The network itself, through a consensus of its users, provides that trust. The symbol carved in silver has become a hash written in data, but the purpose remains: to create a self-verifying token of value that bypasses centralized approval. This shift from physical engraving to digital code highlights the evolution of the tools, but the human objective endures: empowerment outside established structures. The ancient artisan used his skill to subtly alter a die, granting a piece of metal a dual identity that could circulate freely and fund a parallel economy. Today, developers write open-source software that allows anyone with an internet connection to participate in a global financial network, to store value, and to transact without asking permission from a traditional gatekeeper. The community that once trusted a hidden fish on a denarius now places its faith in mathematical proofs and decentralized networks. Both are acts of profound optimism, believing that people can collaboratively define and protect value for themselves. The comparison, of course, is not perfect. Ancient rebellion coinage was inherently local, tied to a specific geography, culture, and immediate conflict. Cryptocurrency is borderless and global, a response to abstract systemic issues rather than a single occupying army. The risks are different, too. Where an ancient engraver faced physical peril, a modern participant navigates market volatility and digital security challenges. Yet this very contrast makes the underlying continuity all the more compelling. It reveals that the drive to reclaim agency over the medium of exchange, to whisper a new narrative of value into the ears of a distrustful world, is a deeply human impulse. It transcends the specific technology of the age, whether hammer and die or computer and algorithm. When you look at a Bitcoin logo, you are seeing the latest iteration of an idea as old as empire itself, the quiet, stubborn determination to mint your own future. The line between a revolutionary's mark and a simple minting error is often as thin as the coin itself. In the world of secret symbols, the most seductive trap is seeing intentional rebellion in every irregularity. It is a natural human impulse to connect dots, to weave compelling narratives from the static of the past. Yet true historical understanding requires a different kind of discipline, one that separates the whisper of a coded message from the random noise of ancient production. The reality is that most oddities on coins are just that, oddities. A die crack from overuse, a mis-strike from a misaligned blank, or later damage from centuries in the earth can all create marks that look, to our hopeful eyes, like deliberate symbols. The academic consensus, built on rigorous methodology, urges caution. It asks us to consider the context first. A single coin with a strange punch mark found in isolation is an anomaly. Dozens of the same coin, from the same region and time period, all bearing that identical mark, that is a pattern worthy of serious investigation. This disciplined approach does not drain the romance from history, it fortifies it. By applying this filter, we ensure that the stories we tell are anchored in evidence, making the cases of clandestine communication all the more powerful because we know they are real. This critical lens also reshapes our understanding of discovered treasure. The romantic notion that every ancient coin hoard was a secret rebel bank, buried to fund a future uprising, is largely a myth. Hoards were buried for many practical reasons: safety during invasion, the savings of a merchant or soldier, or simply because the owner never returned to retrieve them. While some hoards, like those containing exclusively Bar Revolt coins found near rebel strongholds, clearly represent concealed rebel treasuries, they are the exception, not the rule. Most mixed hoards of official and irregular coinage reflect the chaotic economic realities of their time, not a deliberate act of subversive banking. The scholarly focus, therefore, shifts from the treasure itself to the individual coins within it. A hoard provides a snapshot, a closed archaeological context that allows experts to study wear patterns, die links, and the sequence of issues. It can tell us if certain marked coins circulated together, hinting at a localized network, or if they were removed from circulation quickly, suggesting they were discovered and rejected by the authorities. The true value of a hoard lies in this forensic detail, not in a preconceived narrative of buried rebellion. This grounding in evidence is what makes the confirmed cases so extraordinary. We can speak with confidence about the overstruck coins of the Bar Revolt because the archaeological and historical records align. The coins are found in the right places, from the right time, with a consistency of design that shouts organization. Similarly, the debased radiates of the breakaway Gallic Empire are understood because their volume and distinctive style map directly onto a known political fracture. These are not speculations, they are documented chapters in the story of ancient descent. The more ambiguous cases, like the mysterious countermarks on late Roman bronze or the hidden faces in Celtic art, remain in the realm of compelling probability. They are working hypotheses, strengthened by pattern and context, but still awaiting that definitive, contextual link that turns a strong possibility into a scholarly certainty. This space of informed uncertainty is where the real detective work continues, and it is arguably just as fascinating as any finished tale. It reminds us that history is not a puzzle to be solved once and for all, but an ongoing conversation with the past, where each new find can subtly reshape our understanding. By embracing this rigorous, evidence-based curiosity, we honor the true ingenuity of those ancient engravers, ensuring their clever whispers are heard clearly, not drowned out by the modern echo of our own desires. A whisper can be silenced, but a coin demands to be held. This simple, profound fact reveals the deep psychological genius behind using currency as a tool of rebellion. A coin is not a passive object, It is an active participant in daily life, what scholars call an object with agency. Every time you reach into your purse or pocket, you are not just finding money, you are engaging in a ritual of trust with the authority that issued it. The weight, the cool touch of the metal, the recognizable image under your thumb, all reinforce a silent agreement about value and power. When a rebel subtly altered that object, they hijacked this entire psychological process. They transformed a token of imperial control into a physical piece of an alternative future. Holding a coin with a hidden fish or a secret overstrike was not merely an economic act, it was a tangible, private experience of defiance. You could close your hand around it and feel the reality of the resistance, quite literally in the palm of your hand. This constant, physical interaction shaped thought in a way no pamphlet or speech ever could, a principle known as symbolic interactionism. Our beliefs are not formed in a vacuum, they are built and reinforced through our repeated interactions with the symbols in our world. For a farmer paying a tax collector, using an official coin reinforced his subjugation. But paying a sympathetic blacksmith with a rebel coin and receiving one back as change created a different mental loop. Each handling of that marked metal was a small, safe rehearsal of allegiance. It whispered, "You are part of something else," every single time you buy bread or mend a tool. Unlike a fragile scroll that could be burned or a rumor that could distort, the coin was durable. It survived being dropped in the mud, lost in a field, or passed through 100 hands. Its message did not fade, it grew more potent with wear, circulating at the very heart of human survival, the marketplace. Because it was required for the basics of life, food, shelter, clothing, the rebel symbol was guaranteed an audience. People had to look at it, feel it, and accept it. This forced intimacy gave the hidden message a relentless, grinding power. It was not an idea you could choose to hear one day and ignore the next. It was an object you needed to live, and it carried a second soul within it. This explains how such a small thing could sustain hope over years of hardship. In the long, dark stretches between battles or news, when doubt inevitably crept in, the physical evidence of the cause remained. A community could be scattered, its leaders in hiding, yet the coins continued to move, a silent, circulating network proving the rebellion was not a dream, but a functioning, parallel reality. They were seeds of a new identity, sown with every transaction, taking root in the mind long before they could blossom in the world. The coin did not just fund the war, it won the peace within the hearts of those waiting for dawn. These coins force us to listen for a different kind of history. For centuries, our understanding of the past was shaped by the voices that could afford to be loud, the chronicles of kings, the decrees of emperors, the monuments of victors. It was a history written from the throne room and the battlefield, a top-down narrative of inevitable power. But what about the quiet hum of the marketplace, the whispered conversations in a back room, the silent exchange of a marked coin? The existence of these clandestine currencies compels us to write a new kind of story, one often called history from below. This perspective does not ignore the power of empires, but it insists on acknowledging the agency, creativity, and stubborn persistence of the people who lived within them and who sometimes chose to resist. Every secret symbol is a crack in the monolith, proof that even the most authoritarian states were not seamless blocks of control, but were perpetually contested spaces. Power was not just something exercised from above, it was something negotiated, subverted, and quietly challenged in countless daily interactions. The farmer who accepted a rebel coin, the merchant who circulated it, the engraver who carved its hidden message, they were not passive subjects. They were active participants in a silent dialogue about the rules of their world. Their dissent did not require a public square or a printed manifesto. It was encoded directly into the fabric of daily life, into the very object required for survival. This transforms our view of historical change. Major revolts and the fall of dynasties are the dramatic punctuation marks, but the real story often lives in the ellipses, in the long stretches of ordinary time where opposition simmered, networks were built, and alternative identities were forged one transaction at a time. These small metal discs are therefore more than archaeological curiosities. They are material evidence of a fundamental human truth. Across time and culture, people have always found ingenious ways to say no. They have found methods to fund their dreams of a different future, to communicate hope under the watchful eyes of authority, and to leave a tangible record of their struggle in the most mundane of places, the money in their pockets. They remind us that history is not just the tale of the rulers who stamped their faces on the majority of coins, but equally the story of those who, with immense courage and cleverness, dared to use that same canvas to mint a vision of their own. A final hammer blow on a worn die echoes across 2,000 years. From the defiant overstrikes of, to the cryptic faces hidden in Celtic horses, this journey has uncovered a hidden dimension where finance and subversion were masterfully intertwined. These small pieces of metal were never just currency. They were weapons of hope, forged in the shadows of oppression. They were born from the pressure of unjust taxes and cultural erasure, a desperate need to fund survival itself. Their power lay in their ingenious secrecy, crafted by anonymous artisans who risked everything to embed a second soul within the emperor's own coin. This covert artistry transformed them into purposed tools, funding armies, communicating across hostile territory, and waging a relentless psychological war on the very idea of imperial invincibility. Their ultimate lesson is a timeless one, that resistance is often most potent when it works from within the systems it seeks to change. It is the art of using the master's own tools, not to build his house higher, but to quietly loosen its foundations one transaction at a time. As you look at the coins in your hand today, consider the silent power they still hold. They are more than tokens of economic value, they are carriers of our collective trust, tiny canvases for the symbols of our own age. The ancient rebels understood this intimately. They knew that to control the narrative of value is to shape the reality of a community. Their legacy whispers to us from the soil, reminding us that history is not only written in the shouts of battles and the decrees of kings, but also in the quiet, determined clink of a marked coin passed from one palm to another, funding a dream of freedom. If this journey into the shadows of forgotten finance captivated you, there are countless more mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Consider subscribing for more deep dives into the hidden corners of our past. And we would love to hear your thoughts. If you could travel back, which ancient struggle for identity or autonomy would you have wanted to support with a secret coin of your own?